Welcome to a brand new episode of MissTrial, the podcast of three former prosecutors and current law partners and friends. And we're just so happy to be here to talk together about what's going on in the world of law and politics so much. It's so hard to decide what to talk about each week. This is the week of the vice presidential debate, so much going on there. And you've also got these cases in Georgia where Judge McBurney, in two different cases, one of them he's the Superior Court judge. One of them he has brought back abortion in Georgia, declaring that this 6-week ban is unconstitutional. And so that's huge news. I mean, obviously, it's only temporary until it has to be upheld by the Georgia Supreme Court. But for now, women in at least Fulton County, Georgia, can continue to make their own decisions about healthcare and their bodies. And also a case that was going on in Georgia about election, just trying to, the Republicans in Georgia trying to once again change the rules at the last minute to make people do things like hand count and all sorts of things to try and slow things down so that Donald Trump can once again try and steal this election, which brings us to our topic today, which is this bombshell filing in the criminal case where Jack Smith is prosecuting Donald Trump, and he filed this 160 something page tome where he laid out his fact-bound analysis as to why it is that he is not immune from prosecution under this new rubric set forth in United States versus Trump that came down this July. And it just, the reason I brought up the Georgia case, that I actually listened to the hearing and did a hot take on it, because in Georgia, their hearings and trials and courts are all televised, so you get to watch it for yourself. It was so reminiscent of what he's trying to do, or what he did before in the 2020 election, but now he's getting better at it. Now he's using lawfare and filing 3 times the number of lawsuits around the country the Republicans are doing, trying to suppress votes, make votes not count, make all sorts of claims, and teeing it all up. So there are court cases in battleground states where he already has the cases filed, ready to go, and I'm sure we will see that he is going to try and, just in the states that he's losing, bring these cases and find dead voters and fraud and whatever. But it's so reminiscent of what happened in 2020, and that's what was spelled out in this document that was filed in Washington, D.C.
Except, Karen, can I just jump in there for 1 second?
I'd love for you to jump in.
They're doing it before the election. Okay. Last time,
that's the difference. You're right.
Until after. And the importance, I really think it's so important for people to understand the significance of that they are setting the stage. They're doing it with no basis in fact, like making all these allegations, forcing there to be responses. Jim Messina was a former Obama guy from 20 years ago, political guy. And he runs a PAC called Defending Democracy. And all they do is raise money to pay lawyers to go into court all across this country and fight this kind of bullshit that's going on. So it's really important that people understand that, Team Trump learned a really important lesson in 2020, that, it was just his rhetoric, which was, dangerous enough, but it was really only his rhetoric and, from the beginning of 2020, laying this, this whole premise of this is going to be a rigged election. And then all of the legal action, kicking out all of his normal lawyers and bringing in Rudy Giuliani to take these cases to courts all over the country. And they lost every single time. So it's just really important for people to understand the lengths to which they are going pre-election day to make sure that every single American's vote doesn't count if you live in certain states.
I mean, Kathleen, you're a former member of Congress. You're a former elected official. Like, you have to explain to people how just abnormal this is and how sinister it is.
There is not. I mean, look, campaigns and elections are hard enough under the best of circumstances, right? You hire a campaign team like I had to do, and you get your pollster and you get your door knockers and you get your, everyone, your ad people, and you just go mano a mano with you and the other opponent. In none of my campaigns did we ever have this kind of subterfuge going on. It was just, who's going to, may the best man or woman win. And I'm not saying that it was all Pollyanna, but to this extent, that the kind of shenanigans that's going on to this extent is truly unprecedented. And, they can sit there and say, well, Hillary Clinton said in 2016 that Trump wasn't a legitimate president. Guess what? She conceded that race and there was a peaceful transfer of power. When J.D. Vance said during that debate that we don't even have time to talk about today, that Trump allowed there to be a peaceful transfer of power on January 20th, only after the insurrection that he created. I mean, by the way, just a little plug. Michael Polpak and I did a little, for Legal AF, we did a little hot take on the VP debate. Listen for it. It was really fun talking about the stuff, who was the winner, who was the loser, all this kind of stuff. But during that debate, that was one of the most outrageous things that J.D. Vance ever said, that Donald Trump allowed the peaceful transfer of power. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I can't wait to dig in, Danya, first of all, to kind of like, let's give our listeners, how did we get here, and how it's not this grand conspiracy by Biden's, DOJ that got us here.
Yeah, it is actually incredible. And as with so many things in the Trump universe, everything is flipped on its head. So I'm not personally on Truth Social, but I've seen some of his rants about how this is election interference, and that this violates DOJ's own internal rules about getting in the way before an election. And that is just, I don't have a strong enough word to say how stupid and wrong-headed that is. So there is a DOJ rule, and it's not codified anywhere. It's not memorialized. It's just a norm, really, which, Trump cares a lot about norms. But it is that you do not bring a covert investigation overt. You do not make a big step like a search warrant or an arrest publicly right before an election. And 60 days, 45 days, whatever it is, there's this kind of like bubble wrapping around an election because they don't want to interfere with the—
Great way to put it, bubble wrapping. I love that.
So that's the case, but that's not this case, right? This case was brought, God, can you guys remember way back in the dark ages when it was brought? It was well over a year ago. I'm sure more than that, but we're in a weird time warp. And it was Trump who did what Trump does, dragged his feet, waited, and then brought this legal argument. Look, this is the way our system works, right? It goes up and down the court system. Here, it took a lot longer than it needed to have because the Supreme Court refused to allow this case, which was always going to end up there, refused to allow it to leapfrog the Court of Appeals, the intermediary court, to take it faster. And then they waited until past the end of their term, till July 1st, to issue this, precedent setting, brand new rule. And so that is what has taken the time. So that's one thing. So it does not violate any rule, right? And we're here not because Jack Smith chose to. He was fighting tooth and nail to bring this back when he could have, but because of Trump's, all the obstacles he placed in the way, some of them fair, many of them fair. This is the court system that we've got. But that's why.
And the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court enabled this too, by the way.
Correct. They could have short-circuited so much of this, and this could have been decided back, much earlier. But they decided to wait till July 1st. But the other thing is, again,
the last day they were dropping decisions. They heard it on the last day they heard oral arguments, and they dropped it on the last day they were dropping decisions. I mean,
Yeah, that is a I think a window into the mindset there. But also,
Agreed.
again, this is not the kind of thing that is ever implicated in that quote unquote 60-day rule. That's when you're bringing a covert or secret investigation forward to public light. This has been going on forever. The world is well aware of it. So if you had to grind a court case down to a halt within 60 days of an election, you couldn't do public corruption cases. You just couldn't try them because there's always an election, right? A member of Congress could never be tried because there's always
Yeah,
something
right,
corner,
You're
right?
right.
right. You're right. It's every
Yeah,
2 years.
yeah.
Every 2 years
Have
they have
what's
to
meant
run.
by this, and I assume Trump knows that, but certainly his lawyers do, and that's why you don't see it in court filings. You just see it on Truth Social.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's a great point. It's a great point
Yeah.
that this is, but the thing about Trump I've noticed is he's the kind of guy who, as soon as he accuses someone of something, it's really him doing it. It's like, I'm rubber, you're glue. We've said this before,
Yeah.
but it's like you kind of know, like, what did he do, because he's accusing other people of it, and that's kind of how he goes. So it's just crazy.
The biggest defender of that rule, sorry, was Jim Comey in 2016.
Yeah. With
Trump
Hillary.
within a week, 2 weeks, whatever. It was very close before the election when he came out and said what he said. So no one's been, I mean, he should be, falling all over himself, with like the way that this doesn't always play out, but that's not this.
And the other thing, and the reason he's making this accusation, and let's just say it, is because this is a fact. The Supreme Court said to Chutkan, they really chastised the two lower courts for not making a what's now called fact-bound analysis about what are the facts that you are alleging that are official in nature, that he would be immune from prosecution from, and therefore cannot be used. And so as a result, to do a fact-bound analysis, because there's been no trial and no hearing, Jack Smith had no choice but to essentially put all the facts into the record very specifically, because he, when you think about it, indictments are typically very bare bones, right? Although this indictment here has some detail, but it doesn't have all the evidence, right? It doesn't have all of it. So he had to supplement with what the evidence is and what the facts are that he intends to prove at trial. And that's what this document is. And, what was surprising, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Danya, as the only former federal prosecutor in our little group. And, you were high up in the Southern District of New York. You were a supervisor and you prosecuted pretty significant cases. I have a question for you about this. So what I thought was so interesting was the little fighting that was going on back and forth before the filing about what should this be redacted or not, right? Because if we remember, Jack Smith asked for a protective order a year ago, essentially because he wanted Trump to not try this case in the court of public opinion. Well, at that time, Trump was fighting tooth and nail. No, put it all out there, get all the facts out there. And now, though, because Jack Smith said, okay, now that I'm required to do this fact-bound analysis, I don't normally like to show my hand before the trial and talk about it all, but I feel I must. Here, Trump was like, no, you have a protective order. You can't get it out there, because now he doesn't want the facts out there, right? My question, so there was all this going back and forth and proposals. What I was so surprised by was how quickly the judge essentially ordered the clerk to put the redacted version of this on the record. And it's barely redacted, by the way. It's just the names. And they say like co-conspirator or person. Yeah, like you can pretty easily figure it out. They're like, person 26, senator from Michigan who said X. I'm like, okay, that's easy to, but why didn't Trump's lawyers have immediately? Why didn't they have a filing to ask for a stay so that the judge, because, so much of this you can appeal up to the Supreme Court. If I don't understand why, like, did they miss it? Did they forget? Did they make a mistake? Like, why didn't they just once, if they really didn't want these facts out, why didn't they ask Chutkan for a stay pending appeal and then go, so that it wouldn't get released? But like, she released it quickly. It's out there. Was that just a mistake, or is that just something they didn't think of? Like,
well, I mean, because you have to ask yourself the question, a stay on what grounds? These are lawyers who are officers of the court. They're actually good lawyers with solid backgrounds. On what grounds would they ask for a stay? It's unfathomable to me. About the level of redactions that Judge Chutkan has applied, to these papers that the Supreme Court ordered be filed. I mean, that's what is being lost here. I mean,
yeah.
and shows how off base these allegations of election interference are. This is not the DOJ who chose to put it out there. It's kind of dovetails on your point, Karen. This is not like Jack Smith didn't want to do this. He was told by the Supreme Court, hey, you got to go back to Judge Chutkan. You got to show the facts. You got to show your hand. And she's going to decide, first of all, what is out there in public and when. So to your point, this is not the DOJ interfering with the election. This is a judge who has said, I'm going to treat this case like every other case, this defendant like every other criminal defendant. And she's the one who ordered it released with the redactions that it has, and largely agreed with Jack Smith on those and the timing of it. So yes, I think the instinct is to say, well, why didn't they ask for a stay? Because that is their modus operandi. They always do it. But I think here they were maybe guided by better angels, but better judgment, in terms of court procedure here. I don't know on what grounds they would seek an interlocutory appeal, which is very unusual in the federal system.
But Danya, also, didn't Judge Chutkan have some pretty, harsh words for the arguments that Trump's lawyers did make as to the redactions? She basically said every single argument you're making, they made 3 points. They're all political. Not one contained an actual legal argument. So if you can just talk about that.
Fighting to keep this case as a legal criminal matter like every other one. So she has said, I'm not moved by the election calendar. That's not my problem. I am just running this case as any judge would. This is not DOJ now setting the timetable. It's a judge who is following the exact cadence, rhythm, pattern, and timing of every other criminal case. In any case, this would have, you can't say any case because nothing would have gone up to the Supreme Court, gotten this new ruling back. But it's if she had been mandamus, right, which is a higher court telling her she needs to do a factual determination, this is what she would do in any case in the same time frame, right? So that's she'd take them to task because she's like, I don't care about your campaign events or about your election schedule. I care about the docket of this court and keeping this case moving as best I can.
Absolutely. Danya, can you get into I perused, I did not read every single word, but there were some pretty good nuggets in there. And let me just say that there was a recent interview with a Democratic pollster by the name of Celinda Lake. And she said that she was polling independent voters who identified as independent. And she asked about the Jan 6 case. And they said, what was that? What's that about? It's unfathomable to me. It's not so much unfathomable that people don't understand every single legal case that Trump is facing because there is such a plethora of them. But Jan 6, so I don't know. I just throw that out there because, he's crying about this is too close to the election. And there's recent, focus groups showing that a lot of voters have put January 6th in the rearview mirror, even though I think one of the better points that Tim Walz made during the debate with J.D. Vance was asking J.D. Vance if he was going to, if Trump lost. And he said, I just, Tim, I want to look towards the future. He didn't want to answer the question because he couldn't. But so,
then he went back to something in the past, right?
Exactly. But here's the problem. This is the real he said he went into how horrible it was that Harris is trying to, censor people on Facebook. I'm like, what? Apples and oranges. What is it? I mean, it was just a ridiculous non-answer. And that's exactly what Tim Walz called it, a damning non-answer. But anyway, I digress. But I just brought that up because there are so many like unbelievable facts, because the Supreme Court kind of characterized they put things into three categories, conversations or acts into three categories. So if you could go through those just to remind our viewers exactly what the Supreme Court said, and how Jack Smith, I thought, did such a masterful job of really cutting out all the stuff that was inarguably or could have been argued was official, and really just kept it down to the fundamental, factual conversations that in no way could be defined as conversations in his official capacity as president.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, so just to tell, before we dive into the facts, I do think we should remind people of what the standard is that they set forth. And so, and so if you want, I'll just take a crack at it really quick. It's essentially the Supreme Court sent it back down and created this thing. There's core presidential responsibilities, right? Things in the Constitution, things that can neither be like Congress can't change that law, can't legislate that they do something, and you can't stop him from doing, and so you can't prosecute him from doing. So those were core presidential duties, and they said things like dealing with your own DOJ. Then there was, on the other side, was unofficial private acts, right? Those are immune. You are not immune from prosecution for those. But then there were, in the middle, official acts. However, the government can rebut the presumption that those official acts were that you'd be immune from it. And in here, Jack Smith actually talked about what the legal standard is for rebutting the presumption. And it has to do with, and I'll find the exact language, but it has to do with will it interfere with him doing his job? Will it interfere with the executive branch? Will it chill him in any way? Will it cause him to look over his shoulder, kind of thing? Is it sort of, and there's like a test in there. And again, I'll find the exact language. And so really what this is about is making that determination of what is, because Jack Smith then superseded the indictment, took out all the core things that the Supreme Court said they were immune, and only left in things that were either private, like when he was a candidate, or things that were official, but he could rebut the presumption. And in this document, there's 4 parts of this document. And the first is, these are the facts. The second is, this is the law. The third is, this is how when I apply the facts to the law. And the fourth was like a conclusion. And essentially what he asked the court to do was, please rule that the following facts are either they're unofficial or they're official, but you rebutted the presumption. And he even said, can you talk about it in the alternative? So that way, if the Supreme Court disagrees, so in other words, he'd say, I think this is unofficial. Judge, please tell me if you think this is unofficial. And if the judge rules it's unofficial, fine, but also rule alternatively. If, however, it was not unofficial, then therefore I find that the presumption was rebutted because of the following reasons. And Jack Smith asks for that in this document, in this motion, so that it won't go up and down to the Supreme Court multiple times. So it'll be like everything is going to be ruled on this or that. And so that's what the document is about. And I want to dive in on these just incredible facts and some shocking things. But first, I want to take a quick break from some of our pro-democracy sponsors. We love them, and we love that they are supporting MissTrial. And so if it turns out that you like these products or like what we have to say about them, we test them out ourselves. We would never advertise for something that we don't stand behind. And they chose us. They know what we're about, and they have chosen us. So use our special code, and we're going to take a quick break. This summer, do you want to enjoy hemp products but don't know where to get them? Are you in a state where it's not legally accessible? Had enough of overpriced dispensaries? Whether you're lounging under the sun or exploring new adventures, Via's premium hemp products are your perfect companion. They're farmed and crafted with care in the United States and trusted by over 500,000 customers. Via Hemp has a product for everyone. Their wide range of premium gummies covering all effects and strength ranges has you covered. Whether you're looking to set the mood in the bedroom or chill out after a long day, lab tested and certified, Via Hemp's products are sourced from the finest hemp for your peace of mind. Via is well known for their premium THCA flower grown indoors in state-of-the-art facilities and harvested at peak THCA levels to emphasize a natural aroma and flavor. The THCA flower strains are grown with care and rigorously tested to ensure the highest quality, free from harsh pesticides or nasty chemicals. And the best part? Via legally ships to all 50 states in discreet packaging directly to your door with worry-free guarantee. No medical card is required. So if you're 21 or over, check out our link in Via's website and in our description, and you can get 15% off. So you will, I think, like it if you try it, if this is your jam. Unlock the power of nature this summer with Via's organic and vegan hemp extracts, perfect for relaxation and rejuvenation. Via is the only lifestyle hemp brand. They use compounds found in hemp along with active plant extracts to create products, each with a specific effect in mind. Again, whether you want to get better sleep, ease anxiety, enhance your mood, or just feel a little something something, Via is for you. They also have 0 THC products. If THC isn't for you, you can still take advantage of their CBD line. So their products range from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC, and these guys have you covered. They're an industry leader, over 500,000 customers served, made in the USA, and award-winning. They have quality ingredients, and they're affordable and accessible. So if you're 21 or over, check out the link in our description to Via. Use the code MissTrial, that's with 2 S's, MISSTRIAL, to receive 15% off after you purchased. They will ask you where you heard about them, and if you support our show, tell them we sent to you. Again, put MissTrial, MISSTRIAL, to receive 15% off. Are you looking for something simple and delicious to add to your wellness routine? Manukora honey is fantastic, and you can put it in your breakfast tea. You can use it in protein shakes, salad dressings. I use it also in marinades. I love it, and it puts other honeys to shame. It's rich, creamy, and complex flavor with health benefits, and it made me switch from regular honey and artificial sweeteners to this amazing new product. So I love it. It's from the remote forests of New Zealand, and Manukora's master beekeepers are the ones who produce this incredible nutrient-rich honey that supports immunity and gut health. So the bees collect the nectar from the Manuka tea tree in New Zealand, and it's packed with bioactives, and the honey that is produced is 3 times stronger with antioxidants and prebiotics than your average honey. So there's also a special antibacterial compound called MGO that comes from the nectar of the tea tree. So Manukora third-party tests every single harvest for MGO and makes these results available through their QR system. So it's a game changer, and all you need is 1 heaped teaspoon each morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Manuka honey. So this is just fantastic. Use it instead of other sweeteners, and it's really a honey with superpowers. So it's easier now than ever to try Manukora honey. Head to manukora.com/misstrial to get $25 off the starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. So that's manukora.com/mistrial with 2 S's, MISSTRIAL. And thank you so much, Manukora, for sponsoring MissTrial. Okay, we're back, and I can't wait to dive into this document. But again, please support our sponsors. They're wonderful, and we couldn't keep the lights on without them. Also, please support us by subscribing to the new Legal AF YouTube channel. It's at Legal AF MTN, which stands for Midas Touch Network. And there you're going to see a lot of content that is curated by my co-host on Legal AF, Michael Popak, who did a hot take with Kathleen and is going to start doing them with Danya and me. And, we're putting out as much as we can. There's so much to talk about that there's just not enough airwaves. So this new channel is going to be a great place to find that information. And we're going to be talking about all things that we talk about here, and do it in real time as much as we can and put it all out there, because we only have 35 days left or 33 days left before the election. And we got to get as much information out there as possible so people can we have to vote, right? We absolutely have to get as many voters out there as possible. And, frankly, if we lose, but we lose fairly, then we should shake hands and support Donald Trump, who's the next president potentially, because that's what should happen. We shouldn't tear down our society the way he's trying to tear it down. But I don't want him to win. So everybody go out and vote vote the right way. So let's dive into this document, this brief that was filed by Jack Smith with the incredible, shocking allegations, and just the reminder. My God, the problem with time is time can make things less shocking, right? You sort of forget, and you forget how serious it was. You forget how bad it was. Also, you have Trump and all his validators going out there, calling the insurrectionists patriots and really kind of, in some ways, neutralizing and taking the sting out of how bad that all of those efforts were, and that Jan 6, it wasn't just January 6, just how the lengths with which he went to try to steal the election. And this document was incredible. Like, it reminded us of how bad it was. I mean, I was just
even worse. It's even worse than you thought, even worse. And the reason is because, different from the Jan 6 committee, Jack Smith had access to everyone, the complete Trump inner circle, not just on the campaign, but in the administration as well. So on that, Danya, if you want to just start talking about some of the bombshells, I would call them.
Yeah, we heard. Well, just the overlay here is, for me, at least personally, I love the style of the draftsmanship here. It is just, there's nothing flowery or over the top. It is just like very plain spoken and very punchy and to the point. So, you get lines like this one. When the defendant lost the 2020 presidential election, he resorted to crimes to try and stay in office. That's a, pretty punchy recitation, of the theory of the case here. Yeah, the Jack Smith run. So there was a lot, right? Like, thanks to the unbelievable work of the Jan 6 committee and, a lot of insiders who were so disgusted by the events of that day and leading up to it and after, that they have come forward, and, great journalism. We think we know a lot about what happened. And I think we do know the general rubric, like what, kind of all of these baseless cases that were filed, as you pointed out earlier, Kathleen, all of them were, the courts worked and they were all dismissed, right? Or found to have no factual basis. Lots of lawyers were actually faced disciplinary action as a result of filing frivolous lawsuits. And then, Trump moved on to other iterations to try and figure out how he was going to stay in power. And that kind of got us to January 6th. So we knew the overall themes here. But I think what this does, as Karen said earlier, it gives us a lot more detail, right? It gives us the inside scoop and the on the ground view, right, of what happened in real time. And as Kathleen, as you pointed out, a lot of this stuff wasn't available to the January 6th committee because there were claims of executive privilege and other immunity. Here, all those folks, not all of them famously, but, spoke with Jack Smith and testified in the grand jury. And so we got a lot of the actual conversations and communications that happen in real time, including, a theme here, and there are a couple that you guys might want to tease out too, but that Trump knew that that the court cases were bogus and that in fact he had lost the election. He knew it because he was saying as much to other people around him, and other people, trusted advisors, were all saying the same thing, right? With a couple of notable exceptions who have, of folks who have since been indicted or disciplined. And so that comes out, in detail, kind of the threats to Mike Pence, telling him that people were going to, quote, hate his guts and think he's stupid, and telling him, quote, this one really got me, "You're too honest," right? When Mike Pence protested that he didn't approve of the interference. And you get a lot of details like that, right? Of like intimate moments where the defendant, as Jack Smith calls him, would have these candid conversations with his family members and advisors, where he said, the one to Ivanka and Jared Kushner, he says, "Does anyone have a right here? But it's basically whether you win or lose, you fight like hell." Like,
Exactly.
no, that's actually not how elections work. The way they work is peaceful transition of power. Not if you know you lost, you fight like hell. So a couple of those nuggets in there that kind of fly off the page that make you say, like, okay, we now see this is a trial brief. This is the statement of the case in a lot of detail. We see, they're all redacted, but there are, dozens potentially of witnesses. They may not choose to call them all for, efficiency reasons, but who will be testifying. And we see some of the words that are going to come out of their mouths. So that's kind of the new stuff, but basically I thought Jack Smith and his team did an amazing job of responding to I'll say the threat, but the mandate from the Supreme Court, which is, everything here was unofficial and therefore not immune, because Trump was acting as a candidate. And they show this in exquisite detail.
Over and over again. You're right, Danya.
Yeah, it's like a hammer. And there's the last piece, and then I'd love to hear what you think. Very specifically, the Supreme Court said that they believed that or held conversations with Pence might, entitled to a presumption of immunity, like is that an official act or not? And I think he made a really good point saying, no, those conversations and the pressure campaign against Pence was really just related to Pence's ministerial role presiding over the Senate, and that the actions that Trump took are not, like, the executive branch has nothing to do really with an election, right? There's nothing in the Constitution or anywhere else that says you get to have anything to do, president or vice president, with an election other than just actually taking in the votes. So I thought they did a really good job in saying that, look, there's no role for the executive in choosing the next president. That's part of the way we know he's acting as candidate. But I don't know what else jumped out at you guys.
Well, I know that you make a really good point, because they specifically said that the executive branch can play no role in choosing who the next president or vice president is. And he was trying to convince Mike Pence, his running mate. His running mate.
What I loved about that is, we know that the Supreme Court is obsessed with old timey, history. And if it didn't exist at the time when the Constitution was written, it doesn't matter. So much of this document, when he's making the legal argument about the fact that the executive plays no role in an election, cites the Federalist Papers and Ben Franklin and the Constitution, and even quoting at one point, it said in there that the president or the executive branch, the president has no role in choosing the next president, and choosing is CHUSING, because that's how it was spelled in, the Federalist paper that they cited when, from back then. Like, it was so clearly written for this Supreme Court, right? And I thought that was really really smart way to kind of do that.
So this jumped out at me. I don't know why, but it's one of those things that is irrefutable and really makes it clear the distinction between an official act and a private unofficial one. Just take Trump showing up at the Ellipse. Okay. They had the bulletproof glass. Secret Service was protecting him, but that whole event was paid for by private money. Okay. The whole event, it was not paid. It was not an official government thing, to the extent that Jack Smith goes to say, when he walked out, Trump walked out on the stage, they didn't play Hail to the Chief. They played YMCA and Lee Greenwood's, God bless him, the USA. I mean, now that might seem like a little picayune kind of thing, but if the regular person, right, like all of us are, if you want to understand the difference between an official act, everyone knows the song, da, 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 da. That was not being played on the Ellipse. It was a political rally. The other thing about Mike Pence that I really just thought was so outrageous, having been in that building at the time on that day.
Just that it's there time and time again over the course of this, 165-page brief, those little details, are peppered in right throughout, and they're so important because this is a new test, right? And so, how can you figure out which side of the line something? So they just larded up with all these details, like, Pence made a comment to Trump, like, I'm talking to you as a friend, or they're having a quote unquote private lunch, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
For one of the meetings with Pence and Pence staffers, there was no one from the White House counsel's office there, just private lawyers. And in fact, White House counsel was specifically disinvited. So what could be a bad?
I'm so glad you just mentioned that, Danya, because that was that was one of the ones that jumped out at me too, Danya, where they totally excused the White House counsel who represents the president, not the candidate, from the Oval, and kept, what was it, Rudy or some other hat, private attorney hat, whatever. Yeah.
Rudy, Sidney Powell, Team Crazy. No, you're right. That's absolutely things like that were, I think, fantastic. How they really pointed out how there was even his Trump's speech. There was a speech that he gave on January 4th in, I can't remember where it was, but then there was also the Jan 6th speech, and they were showing how, and the one that they gave, I think it was in Michigan, and the speech that was given in Michigan on January 4th was clearly personal. Like, it was marked personal on his calendar, and he came down to help it was like a runoff. And so he came down to help the senators, and they established beyond a reasonable doubt that particular speech was personal. And the reason that was important is so much of the language in that speech was, again, the language that he gave on the Ellipse. And I thought that was interesting how they used that to show that the speech on the Ellipse that got the people riled up to go and storm the Capitol, that was to show that was private and campaign related and not presidential. They just were so meticulous at really parsing through what was official and what was unofficial. And what struck me was sort of interesting there was the Twitter account, the tweets that they were saying how, look, he used that Twitter account since 2009 or whatever it was, like way back when, right? He's been using that personal for a long time, and he uses it personal now, same account, right? But in the middle, when he was president, he sometimes used it for official and sometimes unofficial. And they cited to a court case that shows that when that is the case, you have to go tweet by tweet and figure out which one's official and which one's unofficial, and which one's business related and which one's not. And so they were saying, it was very interesting because Jack Smith was like, although the things that he was tweeting on January 6th were clearly unofficial, and it was going on and on and on. He's like, there were two that might be official. So they're basically essentially saying to Chutkan, so if you want to throw those out, you can, because those might be official. When he ultimately 2 hours later said, hey, be peaceful, go home, and when he basically told everyone to stop rioting, he finally stepped in after people were begging him to. And they were saying, look, he has police powers. He has to, public safety is obviously very important. That might be official. So if you want, we don't have to use those, which I thought was sort of interesting because, of course, as a prosecutor, what do you care that he finally did the right thing? That doesn't really help you. But so, that was what I
want to bring that in, which would
be. Of course, I know.
Does that open the door to other things? Will be a question that we're going to
Exactly. I mean, those are the kinds of little tricks that as trial lawyers, we know that, when we look at it, we know exactly what they're both doing. Like you just said, Danya, they're going to want that in, of course, because that, that definitely helps them. But, the thing that really struck me the most about this whole thing was it just was such a reminder at how serious and how terrifying January 6th actually was. And I know, Kathleen, you were there that day. You were, you had to be, you were like hiding for your life and, in an office, and, you were concerned because you were a member of Congress that day, and you were there when they stormed the Capitol and couldn't participate in your role in certifying the election. Right. I mean, and, I just can't imagine what it was like. And it was just the idea of how serious it was. I was thinking to myself, how would I, if I were to try this case, if I were Jack Smith, how would I open? What would my opening statement be? Because there's so many sections, right? There's the state by state, right? They go state by state. He did, the pressure campaign in the states, the lies, the court cases, the pressuring Mike Pence, the fake electors, all of that. And I ultimately, the way I mean, I know I've come to where how I would open it is not in chronological order. I would start with January 6th, and I would recreate that day, and I would show portions of the speech. I would show the crowds that marched as a result. I would show the storming of the Capitol, and in real time, I would say this happened, and then he tweeted this. This happened, and then when so and such advisor came in and told him, that they're taking Mike Pence, to safety. They're secreting him somewhere because they're going after Mike Pence, and his response was, "So what?" I would go through that, and then I would say, "And what got us there? Why did he do that?" And then I would go in chronological order from there. But I'd want to remind people, I'd want to kind of capture the heart and soul of the jury and get them to be on my side. That's where I landed. But as trial lawyers that you guys are, I just would love to hear what your thoughts are. And we didn't talk about this in advance. So
I have to jump in, because the thing that really, to me, is the most damaging and still lingers is the fact, and this is how I would start. I would take every single quote from Donald Trump in which he acknowledges that he lost, that the case against Dominion was bullshit, that the fake electors was a whole criminal scheme. Like, there is so many statements, and Smith goes into some of them in this, where Donald Trump knows he lost. Danya, you talked about what he said to Jared and Ivanka about, doesn't matter whether you win or lose, you fight like hell. To me, that is the most compelling piece of evidence, because Donald Trump knew that he was going to lose, and he knew on election day that he lost. And yet what he did to convince his followers, his voters, that this was a stolen election, that's what kills me, right? A leader is supposed to tell the truth. A leader is supposed to have enough humility to say, you know what? You can't win them all. and we came up a little short, which is another line that Donald Trump recently said when he was asked about this election. Well, we came up a little short. And instead of admitting it, he spent months. And by the way, here he's still talking about it 4 years later, even though he's dropping in little snippets where he acknowledges that it was all bullshit, that he lost. And that to me is the biggest travesty, because you have people who really believe that this was a rigged election. And it's one thing if they believe it about 2020, that's bad enough. But now in their heads, there can never be an election that is not rigged. And that is the biggest threat to our democracy, I would say. Danya, I don't know how you feel, how you would start.
I totally agree. I thought it was really telling. That was the thing that kind of stood out the most for me about Vance's remarks about the election. All they have to fall back on at this point, because there's no proof of anything, it's just, well, tens of millions of people believe that it was rigged. Well, they only believe that because you've been feeding them this lie for 4 years. And yes, and they're planting the seeds for the next one. And that is absolutely terrifying. So I think both as a matter of democracy and also good trial hygiene and practice, that does have to be in the opening statement here. I mean, what we have to remember about this case, we're pretty steeped in the facts, right? And we've been thinking about it. Like, we have in memory hold, you certainly, Kathleen, haven't been there, haven't memory hold January 6th. But a lot of people, as you pointed out, have kind of forgotten about it. And the jury, almost by definition, they're going to be chosen because they are impartial and they don't really have views. So it will be, I think, just like the January 6th commission did. I think it's probably more closing argument than opening statement. But I think they do have to bring the jury back into that. And exactly as you said, Karen, hit them in their guts and their hearts, the brains, yes, because, there are facts and there's law and they need to apply them. But there has to be a narrative here. And no one can look at that footage, I don't think, right, and just say, like, it's fine, no, like, whatever, this is peaceful protest or tourism or whatever. And so I think that will be for sure a part of it. But obviously that's not the main thrust of the charges here, right? That's the main thrust is there was a fraud. Not that he didn't, they're not saying, there's not an incitement to violence charge per se here. So they have to be a little careful about it. There's going to be argument about it, but at the end of the day, the jury is going to need to understand what happened on that day for sure.
What I thought was the most telling, or I should say the most surprise, I don't even want to know what word I'm going to use, but the thing that hit me the hardest was how sophisticated this was, right? Like, this was a sophisticated, multi-pronged effort to steal the election, right? The first time he tried to steal election, when he dipped his toe in the water, was when he was paying your client, Danya, Michael Cohen, to falsify documents on his behalf to suppress the Stormy Daniels affair from the voters. That was when he first kind of dipped his toe in the water, tried to steal an election. That didn't work. I'm saying that did work. Sorry. And so that did work. And so that I feel like emboldened him in a way, like it emboldened him to say, wow, I can do this. And it was so incredibly, like, they talked about, they said, if, we're going to lie and say we won. I mean, that's, that's in this, that's in the indictment, right? Just say, and that's one of the allegations, one of the factual allegations, that just say you won. Right. Just when they were saying he was so pissed that Fox declared victory for Biden, that he was saying, just we're going to just say we won. And, even though they knew they didn't, and they can prove that 10 ways to Sunday, and because they were going to get people to believe it. And then once they get people to believe it, then they're going to pressure the states. And what states did they pressure? Only the ones he lost in. Only the ones that are swing states. He only called Republicans in those states. He only asked about his own election. He didn't ask about the other people who, it wasn't like he was concerned about voting in general or fraud in general in those states. He was concerned about him. And so he tried to pressure them. He then tried to come up with those fake electors, right? Let's do that through fraud. Then he tried to pressure, well, we can't talk about this, but he tried to get his Department of Justice to essentially make up fake charges and fake fraud and fake investigations. Bill Barr used to be honest about it, his attorney general, but now he supports Trump. It was just, I don't even know what happened. He got hypnotized by the cult. And then he goes to Mike Pence and tries to convince him to not certify the election. They brought 60 court cases alleging fraud, lost every single one. All of this was so much. The efforts were so sophisticated and so not like multifaceted, multi-pronged. It was like, and then when it didn't work, okay, let's take it by brute force on January 6th. I mean, it's just shocking to me what he did. And the thing that's more terrifying is this election. He, like when you see what they did there in a short period of time, they've had 4 years.
4 years.
To plan this one.
Yeah.
And they've got pretty sophisticated lawyers on their side who are helping them mastermind this. And some of it is through these election related cases that they are teeing up in the courts. And, we have to be vigilant and we have to be careful, because this just goes to show the lengths with which they will go to steal this election if they lose.
I mean, they're already, what really is like jumps out, right, is that like they're saying it will be fraud if Harris wins, not if he wins. Like it's just such a, there's only fraud if like how, so they are definitely, setting the stage. And I agree with you almost completely, Karen, about everything you just said, other than, yes, in some ways, there were layers of complexity and sophistication and nuance and engineering and all that. In some ways, they're just so ham-fisted that you almost can't believe it, right? Some of these people who were talking about the elector scheme actually call it, like, I don't think I'm making this up, fake electors, right? Or alternate electors. Like, if you're going to crime, like, do a job.
But also the ringleader was Rudy Giuliani. I mean,
oh, God.
Come on.
Did you see his daughter? Do you see his daughter? Oh my God. His daughter, Rudy Giuliani's daughter, came out. I think it was
actually was very sad.
It was very sad. It was in Vanity Fair.
He basically said, Donald Trump took my father from me. He's a shell of what he used to be. His life has been destroyed, and I'm voting for Kamala Harris. I mean, and you think of her as like the little 4-year-old when her father got elected to the mayor, became mayor. And, kids are always the sad byproduct of, the misdeeds of the parents and the elders in their life. And, she's a lovely young woman. I don't know her personally, but she seemed like it was very heartfelt what she said. And, look, Rudy Giuliani, don't cry for me. I mean, he is an adult and he made his choices, but she saw the deterioration of a man that she admired and was her father, and was America's mayor.
I was going to say we all admired him. He was America's mayor.
Totally melted. We all saw before our eyes.
Right.
That's true.
He was like not just mayor; he was the U.S. attorney in the Southern District.
Right.
And compensated, and now he just like screaming into a void. And I think it's most people aren't taking him so seriously now, but it's the fact that he was the primary architect and spokesperson for this does, make you hope that they don't have a better man for the job or woman for the job the next time around.
Yeah. Well, another thing that Trump said was he hired Giuliani to do it because even his campaign lawyers said, it's done. You lost. There's no fraud. There's nothing. So he said, okay, you're out. Rudy, you're in. And by the way, I'm only going to pay you if you win. And the guy lost every single case, never got paid a penny, or so this story is. And it's just so Trumpian, right?
Now he's at $148 million.
Yeah, but I know you're not going to win because I know this is all BS. But if by some miracle you win even one of these cases, then I'll pay you. I mean, it's just, you can't write this.
Yeah, I was taking that.
Of course not.
Good.
Well, he's now for bankruptcy, right? And is these 4
Crazy.
election workers who he defamed and terrorized are now having to chase him.
Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss.
It's really just
awful.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, you were referring to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the mother-daughter duo who they're in this, they're going to testify at this trial. So, they're going to,
they have to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're very effective, and I think they're very compelling, and they would be, they're exhibit A of what Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and all of them, what it's done to people's lives, So,
yeah.
Anyway,
to your point, Karen, like have an emotionally impactful witness like that does wonders with juries, right? They're like, oh, they probably can relate to them, see that this is a person like me, and look what's happened to their lives, totally upended as a result of this fraud.
100%. 100%. But of course, this is not going to get to a jury anytime soon, because this is going to go to the Supreme Court one more time before then to make sure that Judge Chutkan has made the right ruling or the correct ruling. Well, it's going to go to the DC Circuit, then the Supreme Court on presidential immunity. And of course, if Donald Trump wins the election, he will appoint the next attorney general, who will likely dismiss this case and all the cases against him and pardon all of the January 6th insurrectionists and make them heroes and patriots, and pardon himself and his family members and all of his friends. So that is what will happen if he is elected to all of this. But that's why everyone has to vote, and we're going to have to keep saying it all over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah,
totally immunized. All right. Well, I think we have reached the end of another episode of MissTrial. And
Happy New Year, ladies.
Yeah. Happy New Year. And it's Rosh Hashanah. And
happy one.
Yeah. And Happy New Year to everybody who observes. And I just love spending time with you guys always.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the Midas Touch newsletter at MidasTouch.com/newsletter.